Call the August 29th meeting of the Carson City Planning Commission to order. Could we have a roll call and determination of a quorum, please?
Chairperson Sattler. Vice Chair Monroy.
Here.
Commissioner Borders.
Here.
Commissioner Eswine. Commissioner Preston.
Here.
Commissioner Tingle.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Thank you.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. For possible action, approval of the minutes of July 25th, 2018. Any changes or discussion? If not, I'll take a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Have a
Elise
motion.
Monroy for the record.
Can we have a second?
I'll second.
Second, all right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Public comment.
The public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Planning Commission, including any matters that is not specifically included in the agenda as an action item. Is there any public comment at this time? Seeing none, move on. Modification of agenda. Lee, is there anything need to be done?
No modifications recommended.
No modification. Public hearing matters. SUP-18-111 for possible action to consider a special use permit for a gaming unlimited use and sign that exceeds the height limit in the retail commercial zoning district on property located at 2811 South Carson Street, APN 009-112-25. Hope?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The request is for a special use permit for an unlimited gaming use and for a sign that's taller than allowed. The subject property is at the southeast corner of the intersection of the frontage road that runs along South Carson Street and Sonoma Street. It's zoned retail commercial. It's the site of the former Grandma Hattie's. Surrounding uses to the north are car repair and a hotel. To the east is vacant and the storage facility. To the west is South Carson Street and then an automobile dealership. And to the south is a hotel. The applicant is proposing to occupy the existing building and operate a gaming use 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Exterior improvements to the building will include the incorporation of rough sawn timbers, corrugated metal siding and roofing, manufactured stone accents, and new stucco. Site improvements will include the expansion of the parking area and providing for increased landscaping. In terms of the signage, the applicant is proposing a sign height of 30 feet where 20 feet would normally be allowed. Of this entire application, that's the portion that really concerned me, to be honest with you. When you go to the site, it felt as if a casino use at that location, given the surrounding uses and given the level of access, vehicular access would be fine. But I didn't want a sign that's stuck up higher than all the other signs. So what we did, and here's a street view where you can see all these other signs, is we compared the height of the signs. So the Grandma Hattie sign is currently 26.5 feet. The Super 8 sign is 30 feet tall. The Service Center sign is 25 feet tall. The Motel 6 sign is 30 feet tall, and the Best Value sign is 28.5 feet tall. So given those heights, it felt like this sign at 30 feet would fit in with the surrounding signs. My concern was we had a sign that would be significantly higher than the surrounding signs, and that will not be the case. As the Planning Commission knows, when you're considering a special use permit, and you have two really before you today, you have the use of a gaming, unlimited gaming use on the site is a conditional use, therefore subject to a special use permit, and you have a sign that's proposed to be 30 feet tall when the code allows it to be 20 feet tall. With a special use permit, you can allow it to be 30 feet tall. So as you consider those requests, you consider the 7 required findings of fact. Staff has reviewed each of those findings of fact in the staff report and has been able to make those findings in the affirmative for both the gaming and for the sign height. And the staff is recommending approval subject to conditions. I'm happy to answer questions, and Susan Pansky is back in the chambers representing the applicant.
Hope, do we handle these individually or together?
I've drafted the motion so you can handle them together.
Questions,
Chair?
staff?
Yes.
Commissioner?
Given that we're going to do some pretty extensive street modification, what is that view going to, do you have any suggestion or idea as to what that view is going to look like once the new streets are complete?
Yes, I did. I reached out to Dirk Goring when I was looking at this application to determine what the future of the frontage road would be, and he said right now the plan is to keep the frontage road intact. So the staff report was written with that understanding.
And Hope, as far as the sign goes, for me, I noticed that the design of the sign, the top 5 feet's kind of angular and opened anyway, and also I think the larger signs are probably there because possibly the frontage road. If we're right on the main drag, I might have a little more problem with it, but I don't, maybe that's why they're taller all along there, possibly. Any other questions for staff?
One other.
Go ahead.
In the conditions for approval, I noticed that the fire department requested that the building be sprinkled. Is that a given that they request it to be sprinkled, or should it be in the conditions for approval?
That's a code requirement. It's not negotiable. So anything that's a straight code requirement that my colleagues included, just to be informative to the applicant, but wasn't a discretionary item, I did not include in your conditions of approval. So that specific one is a code requirement. You'll see there is a condition of approval regarding the freestanding sign, and that be designed and located so that the intersection sight distance is not affected. That's something I think is important to make the findings.
Would the applicant come forward, please? State your name.
Evening,
Hi,
Mr.
welcome.
Chairman, members of the Commission, Susan Pansky with Rubicon Design Group, here representing Scott Tate and Woody's Entertainment for the Lucky Strike Casino. We've reviewed the staff report and agree with all the conditions of approval, and I'd like to thank Hope and Stephen for helping work with us on this project, and Hope for doing a great presentation. She's pretty much covered everything that I would have said if I had been doing my own separate presentation.
Nothing you wish to add at this time?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you. Public comment? We'll open this up for public comment. Anyone wish to comment on this item? Would you please come forward and print your name and state your name? And
Sure. My name's Dave Messer. On the sign, it is in height, like you said, with the other ones there. My concern is that if it's more fluorescent, it's going to shine light into the neighboring backyards. When Hope did her presentation and showed the frontage road, that was one thing. But what about all the traffic that's going to be put on Sonoma Street? Traffic exiting to 395 all hours of the night. If they go the back roads, the traffic is going to end up on Silver Sage. I don't think that those roads have been addressed in that, and I don't think that they're able to handle the excess traffic. Another one of my concerns is excess noise late at night. There is residential areas, which wasn't brought up in the presentation. It was mentioned the motels and the vacant lot and that, but right behind there, there's a lot of residential homes on the other side of that. That could be a problem. That's one of my concerns. Also, customers from the casino walking home at night after they've been drinking. If they want to take a shortcut through the residential, will they be jumping over the people's fences into backyards, things like that? And also, I think there was mentioned a back of the house function on that proposed site, and I'm not quite sure exactly what that means.
Okay, in generic terms, if you think about a restaurant, you have what's called front of house and back of house. Front of house is the people who greet you, the people who wait on your table. Back of house is the folks who are in the kitchen, washing dishes, prepping food. So what they're saying is there will be the people who are interacting with the customers, and then there will be people in the back who maybe are counting money or dealing with logistical things, and the customers don't see those people.
So that would basically be inside and not causing excess noise late at night then?
Yes, and I'm sorry to use that terminology. I probably should have used different terminology.
You cleared it up great. Thank you very much. And then the last thing, which is probably not a big issue, could be water. There used to be a 100-year floodplain there. I'm not sure with the excess customers that'll be in there, if the sewage needs to be checked out for overflow. I know on Pat Lane, which is kind of a drainage down that way, they've had quite a bit of flooding problems underneath the houses down there. So just another one of my concerns.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wish to comment on this? Please come forward and state your name for us.
Good evening. My name is Margaret Orsi, and I am a resident right where Sonoma is, and I have the same concerns that Dave has brought up. One of my concerns living alone is the fact of security. You've got a lot of people that will be, at the casino late. It's a 24-hour operation, and you're going to have 2 bars that are going to be in there. So you're going to have a lot of people drinking, partying. So where are these people going to go? If they lose all their money, are they going to try to, break into homes and get a few things to make up the difference? I don't know. I've already been broken into once, and so I do have a security system in my home, but that still doesn't deter people. So I'm thinking for security purposes, I think a consideration should be made to install a block wall along that residential area. And it could be a 10-foot block wall. Plus, that will help with the noise. There's going to be more traffic flow, and people already speed down that street like you can't believe. So either some undulations should be put on the street to slow people down. That might help, but I think with the noise, that's one of my concerns, the security. The frontage road, the illuminated sign, it wasn't very detailed, so I'm worried about the light. My bedroom faces that backside, so there was really nothing that really said what type of sign it was going to be. Let's see here. So the traffic mainly. It was hard to really see on the items that came in the mail to look at the site plan. It was pretty small. So, it was hard to really figure out what was going on. I think that should cover it, but those are my concerns
Thank
as
you.
a resident. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to comment? Okay, bring it back to the, oh, please come forward. I'm sorry, didn't see you.
First of all, my name is Pearl Messer. I'm in the high 80s, and sometimes I have a tendency, because my hearing isn't too good, to kind of shout. That doesn't mean I'm angry if it happens, so please bear with me. All right. I have the same concerns as the two that have been up here. It's the extension of the 10-foot sign. I see no reason for it, under the same reasons they have given you already, so I won't bore you with it. Also, my concern was, what does limited use mean? To me, that could mean anything. And so I do have quite a bit of reservations over that. I think there should be something in there to make sure this in use is not just carte blanche. The other thing is traffic. And my concern mostly is Sonoma, as everybody knows, is a two-lane road. It's really used more for families if they want to walk their dogs in the evening or in the daylight, or children. We have in our cul-de-sac where I live, there's a lower cul-de-sac and a higher one, which is about 25 or 30 feet from Sonoma. There's children, all ages. There's also seniors, all ages, as well as adults that work all the time. And anybody that misses Sonoma on Silver Sage or going Route to Silver Sage think that is the way through. They have to come in and turn around and go out. And with that, with the casino there, I'm concerned that we will have a real increase in traffic. And I think that just about covers everything everybody else has brought up. And that's really all. Thank you so much for allowing me.
Anyone else wish to comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to Commission for further discussion.
I have a question.
So Commissioner Monroe.
Thank you. Elise Monroy for the record. So I know that we are considering the sign height, which I think is compatible to signs in the areas I'm comfortable with, but it sounds like there was some public comment about, with folks concerned about the brightness of the sign. So I wonder if we maybe can put some information on the record about I think it's called the full color electronic message center, and how bright that will be, and because I know there's standards and codes that the city establishes for those things.
Yes, and if you saw me shuffling through my book during public comment, I was looking for the exact same thing. So yes, in 4.6.6 of the development standards, it does say the brightness of the sign at full white screen must be limited to 0.3-foot candles over ambient light measured at a distance of 10 times the square root of the area sign. So when the sign is prepared by the sign company, they'd have to meet the standard. Also, and sorry to give this to you late, but I listen to public comment too, and I don't get the benefit of it like you do. And I spoke to the applicant just now. I think there is some wisdom in adding a condition that at the time the construction plans come in for the lighting, that the applicant verify the lighting will go in a northerly and southerly direction and will not spill over into the residential area. And the applicant agreed to that.
I was going to bring that up, that the sign does face north and south, will be the two lit sides of it, and it's out on the frontage, almost to the frontage road where it's there. For clarification, surrounding area behind that lot, isn't there a storage unit as well before you get to the residential? And there's a stone wall, I believe, on the storage unit. So there are residents across the street, and I believe those are all fenced as well, once you get past the hotel. You clear that up?
I have the property lines, the project location up on the screen for you. You'll see the property directly to the rear of the subject property is vacant. And then the property beyond that is a storage facility.
I'm guessing I drive that road every day just because I live over in that neighborhood, but that's got to be at least 50 or 60 feet beyond the property line, or more than that, I would think, back before you got to the houses.
Just one.
Mr. Borders?
Back to our sign. Before, when we considered signs, there's always been verbiage about whether it flashes or not and all the other things. When we write this condition, though, we're going to have all of that in there so that we don't have to argue about 3 seconds or 2 seconds or whistles and things going on.
That item was, the code was actually amended in 2017 to codify those conditions that we used to incorporate. And so the codes currently calls for a transition time between different messages being displayed, may not exceed 1 second, and so on and so forth, to create the compatibility, both for traffic as well as to limit it. So that, the reason you don't see that is because we included it in the code in 2017.
And for clarification, actually, the Grandma Hattie's sign currently is 26.6 feet, and it's lit to the top, where this one is down almost 5 feet to where that starts. So in theory, that's actually a little bit under, the lit part will be a little under where the Grandma Hattie's sign is currently.
So when the traffic study was done, or when you made the determination that there was not going to be any detrimental effect to traffic flow, what was that based on? Number of individuals anticipated visiting the location at any given point in time? I mean, how was that extrapolated?
Stephen Pote with Development Engineering for the record. So the applicant used the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They have tables that give estimated trips for different uses, and a casino is one of those. They provided the estimated peak hour trips based on the size of the facility, and it's below our trigger for requiring a traffic impact study. And that's for the entire thing, and typically with a change of use, we'll look at the difference between the previous use and the new use. So even at looking at the entire facility, they're below the trigger.
Along that line also, before the freeway came in, I was to the point trying to get out there that you probably shouldn't have allowed a left-hand turn. If someone put their blinker on, I'd turn and go down and come out. But since the freeway's in, there is so much less traffic on that street now, on that part of the street, that it's quite easy to get in and out. You don't have to sit there 4 or 5 minutes sometimes to get out. Further discussion or a motion?
I think you have more public comment.
Oh,
I just have a question about the traffic flow, or the traffic study. So there really wasn't a study done?
Oh, is that, sorry.
So there really wasn't a traffic study done? Is that what I heard you say?
That's correct. They used the estimated trip generation rates.
What does that mean to us as residents?
So those rates are based on statistics that people have done studies. They've looked at existing uses for different types of properties, including casinos, and they look at the averages that those uses produce and tabulate that data to estimate what a particular use would generate.
So when it was Grandma Hattie's for umpteen years, obviously they weren't a 24-hour facility, which is what is being proposed. So you had breakfast, lunch, dinner crowds that came in and out at different times, and then that was it. So I would think at that time, the traffic flows were a lot less. So but you're telling me that with a casino, 24-hour facility, it's still going to be in that same margin? Isn't there going to be an increase?
So the different triggers are, the two main ones are peak hour and average daily trips. So compared to Grandma Hattie's, I'm not sure what it would be. In their memo, they didn't actually give us what Grandma Hattie's would have been. As I was saying to the commission, they gave us the total. It would have, yeah. So, and we can request that when they come in for the improvement plans. However, again, that's only going to be in their favor because then it'll be subtracting from what they're going to be producing, if that makes sense.
I guess I really don't have a comfort level as a resident. Maybe, yeah, with the freeway, some of that traffic flow from Sonoma to Carson Street is minimized, but now you've got people coming in from either north or south, coming into the casino area, coming into the parking area, and they might, if they're drinking, they might not want to go to the main street. They're going to come east on Sonoma, and that's right where our backyards are. And at that point, either they're going to go on Silver Sage or whatever. So again, there's going to be that, I believe, an increase in that traffic flow at all hours of the night. And when people are drinking and driving, it's just a concern. I just want to make that.
And we appreciate that, but do you mind stating your name for the record so when we're taking minutes, we know who to attribute your comments to?
Margaret Orsi. Thank you.
We closed public comment, I believe, after all of you commented, so thank you.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Elise Monroy for the record. I move to approve SUP-118-111, a request for a special use permit for a gaming unlimited use and a sign that exceeds the height limit on property zoned retail commercial located at 2811 South Carson Street, APN 009-112-25, based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report, but also to add to the conditions of approval that the light from the sign will face north and south only.
We have a motion, we have a second.
I'll second that.
Second from Commissioner Preston. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Moving on. SUP-18-108 for possible action to consider a special use permit for a church use on property zone general office GO located at 911 East 2nd Street and 211 South Pratt Avenue, APNs 004-092-24 and -28. Hope?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request for a special use permit for a church. The subject property is located at the southwest corner of East 2nd Street in Herbron, with the parking lot extending to South Pratt Street. I posted an aerial photograph of the site for you. The property is zoned general office. It's the former site of the Greater Nevada Credit Union. Surrounding uses are to the west, office and single-family. To the east, single-family residential and multifamily residential. To the north is the sheriff's office, and to the south is single-family residential. The applicant is proposing to occupy the existing building. The applicant has indicated ancillary uses will include social services, adult and character building programs, and holiday programs. Per the application, the programs are primarily indoors and outdoor activities are minimal. There will be no outdoor amplification and no change in the existing outdoor lighting. Office hours are anticipated to be 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. The youth program hours are 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and Sunday school and church will typically end by 2 o'clock on weekends. The one exterior change is the conversion of a drive aisle along the southern property line into parking spaces. I have a photograph of the area there now, and you can see it's the drive aisle with a planter adjacent to the southern property line, and that's a chain link fence with slats. And you can even see in the photograph, but if you were able to go to the site, you could also see that you can see through the fence right now. So given that you do have single-family homes right on the other side of that fence, I have included a condition of approval that that solid fence that will adequately screen the headlights would be installed along the southern property line. Again, when you consider a special use permit, you need to consider the 7 findings of fact. Staff has reviewed those findings in the staff report and been able to make them in the affirmative, subject to conditions of approval. Mark Sear from the Salvation Army and John Kopolas, the architect, are both present representing the Salvation Army, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions for staff? Commissioner Monroe?
I have a lot of questions, but I don't know if we want to hear from the applicant. I have a lot of questions about this application, and I don't know if we can hear from...
Staff related, or you want to hear from...
Well, okay, I'll ask staff. Okay, so this is Elise Monroy for the record. Okay, so why are we calling this a church? And how did we get to the church being the primary use? Because the application that's submitted from the applicant is to change the use from a bank to an office to a family community center, is what the material from the applicant says. So I'm wondering how we jumped to the primary use being a church if the building will only be used 12 hours a week for church services, but 55 hours a week for youth and community programming. So my concern is actually not with the use of the building. My concern is with the transparency of this application. So I just want to kind of talk through that.
I can speak to that. Actually, prior to this application being submitted, the Community Development Director and I met with Mark Sear. And he outlined in that meeting some of the functions that would be happening on the site, which included worship. And I remember in that meeting saying, wow, I wonder what we call this. And as we talked through it, we said, well, it is a church. It's a place of worship, and churches traditionally have other programming to support the community. And this was consistent with that. And I'm glad you pointed that out, actually, because when the application came in, I thought to myself, and I actually should have thought harder, and I probably should have called Mark about it, but I thought to myself, well, why doesn't it say church? But in interpreting the interpretation using the uses of the code was a church.
The Lee Plymouth Community Development Department, straight to it. The definition of a church says, means any building used for religious worship services, religious education, and fellowship activities and programs of a religious organization, which they are. The term includes the use of buildings and premises for other related activities such as childcare facilities, formal educational programs, preschool classes, and recreational activities, and those activities related ancillary to religious use. So it is inclusive of those ancillary activities, and they are certainly a religious organization with those ancillary activities. So we feel the use under the codes of the church. The zoning district also allows offices and other uses, but we think it best fits as a church under the definitions of Carson City Municipal Code.
So I understand that, but again, my issue is with the transparency of the application. And maybe if we understand, and maybe if we can hear what the youth programming is, because to have youth programming from 7:30 in the morning till 6 p.m. at night, does that mean that we're going to have parent drop-off and kids playing outside? Because we've heard other applications for facilities like that. And so and it's a youth center or a community center or a children's center. My issue, and I appreciate hearing the definition in code. I'm uncomfortable with this application because I feel like we're being asked to approve a coffee shop, but really the coffee shop is a cart inside of an auto repair center. So I just want to understand, maybe, and if we can understand what the youth programming is, and is there going to be drop-off, is it going to be outside? I can appreciate that worship is happening there, but it doesn't seem like a primary use as they break down how the building will be utilized.
So I hope you can get past the definition and not try to fit this into something else. That's an appropriate discussion under the special use permit as to the activities and impacts to the neighborhood as to how they're operating. So those are certainly good questions to answer, but I don't think the path is to say we should call this something else
But we
tonight.
didn't tell the neighborhood that we were considering a family community center. We noticed the neighborhood that we were considering a special use permit for a church. So that's what I'm a little stuck on.
Actually, and again, I think your comments are really helpful because I received a call just today, for example. Our notice did call out those uses that the applicant had put in about having social services, adult, and youth character building programs and holiday programs. I believe our notice did say that. And I did get calls from the neighborhood saying, what are they doing there? Is this a government program? And so on and so forth. And we put that summary in so we're not being so tied to the code. This is a church, and that's all we're going to tell you. We try to be transparent. We have to look at our code and identify what the use is. So I think we're past that. Then the question is, to what extent are there ancillary uses? You need to look at your 7 findings of fact, including neighborhood compatibility. And when the applicant has the opportunity to explain to you what he's intending in terms of programming, at that point you weigh it against your findings of fact. But definitely, and the gentleman who called me earlier today, I said, that's exactly why we put this in the notice, and the commission will definitely want to hear any concerns from the neighbors on this matter.
Commissioner Tingle?
Couple of things. Is this a 501c3 nonprofit? Okay. So is this somewhat similar to what is going on next door to the First United Methodist Church in their Small Blessings preschool, where they have parent drop-offs and pickups, and it's residential, and it's in actually the historic district, and so it being a 501c3, which is a nonprofit church affiliation with a educational center associated with it within a residential area, I don't see that as an issue as far as identifying it as a church. The church services at the First United Methodist Church happen on Sunday from 8 o'clock until 12, and that's when church occurs. There are a whole lot of other things going on in the church and that ancillary building throughout the week. Al-Anon, Gamblers Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, any number of different small groups that are affiliated with the church. So as far as the usage of this building being more than just a place of worship, I have absolutely no problem with that at all. And I think it's a good use of that location.
Other questions for
I'd
staff?
like to hear from the applicant.
Applicant, would you like to come forward, please?
My name is John Kopelos. I'm an architect representing the Salvation Army. With me is Captain Mark Sear, who heads up the Salvation Army in Carson City. Their facility currently is on Colorado Street. Is everyone familiar with that? And all of those facilities that are currently occurring there are moving here.
First of all,
I kind of take exception with one of the comments that we're trying to snowball the commission.
Oh, that's not what I mean. It's
Well,
just, my issue
We
was,
wrote like a dozen pages of information here, and all of it is in here. And I'm just befounded by that.
I apologize if my comments were curt or cavalier or rude. I read the application, but what I read was that you're applying for a family community center, and what we're considering was a church. So it just seemed like, and I understand now, so it just seemed like there was, it didn't match, but I understand now that it does. So I apologize if I was rude or curt, but I did read the application.
The church needed a special use permit. Some of these other functions don't. So that's where the church came from, because the church does need a special use permit in that zone.
Okay.
The other functions are really office functions and could move there without incident, but we're doing all of it. So I think that's where the churches come from. So
First of all, you've seen the conditions of approval,
yes,
recommendations, conditions of approval, and you're accepting of all those?
Go ahead, Mark.
Yes, Hi, I'm Mark Sear. I'm a captain with the Salvation Army, the local leader, along with my wife, Captain Leslie. Yes, we're in agreement with the conditions of approval.
Could I make one question?
If you'd like to add
alley
anything.
where adjacent to where this fence is, does the fence stop at the alley, or is the alley abandoned and we go across? So we could go clear across that property.
The alley has been abandoned on the subject property. We can review those documents.
Okay, we can look at that. That was one of my questions.
Is there anything else you would like to add to Hope's presentation or whatever? Okay, with questions for the
I
applicant?
have a
Mr.
question
Borders?
about the site plan.
Yes, sir.
Like we're talking about where that alley is vacated and the two lots, are you going to be able to drive all the way through in that parking lot? In other words, if you come in on Harper Street, can you exit on Pratt Street?
Yes.
So that curb and all that, the mobile banking and all that other stuff will be removed so that...
Actually, the drive-up teller, automated teller, the bank wants us to keep that for them.
Okay,
So we've worked our parking around that.
I see.
But
Okay.
otherwise, it's a through drive in terms of parking.
Are you all, is it a lease or a purchase? Because that's the question I had on the application was that the property owner is still listed as Nevada Credit Union.
Correct. They are leasing with the intent to purchase.
I see, okay, so that's why you have to leave that,
Correct.
okay, thank you.
They're still the property owner.
And that's the one drive-up teller closest to the building, right?
No,
Oh,
it's the one way in the back.
Oh, the one in the back as well, okay.
The one way to it. It's this little orange dot that's back there. Yes, right there. I'm surprised that the bank is using it, but they are.
Okay.
I don't know how, remotely, I guess they're using the ATM.
Thank you. Elise Monroy for the record. So for my education and the benefit of the record, can we hear about what the youth programming is?
Yes. We run a day camp from 7:30 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night, about 10 to 11 weeks a year. So it's a summer day camp, and then when the kids have breaks during the year, we run it as well. Other than that, we will not open that building as a norm until about 9 o'clock. We do have an after-school program where we go out and we pick up kids at the different elementary schools and bring them to our location, and then parents pick them up by 6 o'clock during the school year. So that's the youth program. We also run youth programs at the local schools in the morning, but they don't affect the building at all.
Thank you.
One minor concern or question I have, it's your Colorado property, you have a place where people drop off furniture and everything else outside in the parking lot. Is that going to be prohibited in this
We
area?
have a policy that we do not take furniture or in-kind gifts there other than food. That doesn't mean that people don't drop things off. At one time, we did have a box there, and we removed the box, we put signs up.
Wonderful.
But we still have stuff being delivered there.
I didn't realize the box had been removed. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll take anyone wish to public comment on this item. Please come forward and state your name for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record and commissioners, good evening. Rob Joyner. I'm here tonight in favor of this project. I'm on the board of directors of the Greater Nevada Credit Union. Our Chief Financial Officer, Joyce Whitney Silva, submitted the application on behalf of us. She couldn't be here tonight. I'm here for other matters also, so she wanted me to just let you know we are in full support of this. We think this is a great use for our building that we had for many years. It was our original branch dating back to 1949. It wasn't in place in 1949, but when we got out of someone's kitchen, this became our first branch. And we got a lot of adverse comments when we closed that a few years ago because it was so centrally located, especially to state and city workers. They could walk to it. I used to walk to it when I worked with these fine people over here. Just a couple issues, not to get into the minutiae of the details, but regarding the 24-hour nature, Mr. Kopolis is correct. That ATM, we would like to keep that there. We might convert it to an ITM, and that's a whole other matter. But over the years, just think about it, we had not only that ATM, but the ones that you drive through where the drop-offs were, that's a 24-hour facility. I like the idea that to protect those residents to the south, a condition of approval is to make that chain link with slats fence, a solid fence. That's a very good idea because that's been an issue in the past, and that's a great upgrade, I think. But this project, I think, will be great. It's obviously a well-welcomed facility in the community, and as Captain Sears said, this is just transferring from Colorado Street over here. Colorado Street is in a residential neighborhood. This is a residential neighborhood only on two sides. You have the sheriff's office, you've got offices to the west. This is really a mixed-use neighborhood, if you will. And I just personally believe, and I think speaking for the board and the management of Greater Nevada, with the conditions of approval that you have, I think this is a very well thought out project. Thank you.
Anyone else, public comment on this issue? Please come forward and state your name.
Hi, my name is Priscilla Foray. My husband Michael and I are in the south property on Harbin. We've been in that house since 1999. Our main concern, and I appreciate the addition of the solid wall. They're removing the established bushes that the bank had put in for some privacy. We've planted foliage on our side as well for privacy. Them taking those bushes out and having diagonal parking directly up against the fence. If it's a wooden slatted fence, the headlights are still going to come through and into our windows. We would suggest a block wall for sound deafening, to possibly, have somebody parking and boom, hit the fence into our RV, into our backyard, into our dogs. For safety, security, privacy. We appreciate being notified of this project. We were never notified when the Carson Counseling Center went into the neighborhood, right directly west of the bank. We constantly have issues with the people who attend that facility. Noise, cussing, loud music, garbage. I know the Salvation Army is a great organization, and I would hope they would control their people, but that's our main concern, is our privacy, our security, soundproofing. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Any other comments? Please state your name for the record.
My name is Valerie Dockery. I'm with the Carson City School District. I'm the Director of Grants and Special Projects, and I'm also an advisory board member for the Salvation Army. I've been on that advisory board for about 5 years now. I work hand in hand with Salvation Army on their after-school programs and their before-school programs. They've been in our schools and serving our kids now for almost probably going on close to 16 years in this partnership. I just really want to attest to the integrity of those programs and the really the professionalism that is used in providing those programs and the need for those programs. The children that attend their day camp in the summer cannot afford to have a babysitter. They can't afford even to go to the program at the community center, which is $30 a week. So in the summer, this is the greatest option so parents can continue working. So this is a wonderful project. As an advisory board member, we have been running a capital campaign, trying to raise money so they can eventually purchase a building. They are completely out of space in their current location, which is in a residential area. A lot of people don't know that the Salvation Army store in town does not belong to this Carson City chapter. It belongs to the Reno chapter and funds the programs in Reno. So I really want to make that clear to everyone here. Clients that come to the Salvation Army in Carson City can get vouchers to shop there from the captains and from their director, but it does not fund, none of that money funnels into this chapter. So it is not part of what's happening in Carson City for that Salvation Army. It doesn't fund this location. It doesn't fund the capital campaign. It's separate, completely separate. So I want everybody to know that because they are working literally on a shoestring budget, providing unbelievable amount of social services to families, parents, which is part of the mission of the Salvation Army Church and has been for how many years that the Salvation Army has been in existence. That is part and parcel of the church's mission. So I just wanted to make all of those things clear and to show that we are really in support. We've been working a long time to get to this point, to get to a new location. So thank you.
I just would like to mention one observance. I think this location probably with the busyness of Colorado Street with children and that is probably a little safer area for the kids because there's not the amount of traffic on those side streets there is on Colorado. My only concern, I mentioned earlier, I don't know if we need it in condition, it says a solid fencing. Is that, I mean, is it specific to material or whatever? You can put up fence, and if the boards aren't touching, you know, whatever. And the drop box issue, I don't know if we need something that I would not want anything outside where people could be dropping things off, encouraged by a box. That's my only concern.
The staff recommendation was for a solid fence, and I use the word solid to distinguish between a solid fence and an open style fence that you can see through. Priscilla, when she testified, did ask for a block wall. That was not staff's recommendation. That doesn't mean it wouldn't serve the same purpose, but I was looking for an opaque fence to block the headlights and to create the privacy that the neighbors were suggesting. We can certainly add a condition of approval that there will be no drop box for donations, recognizing that food is an allowable donation.
And would we oversee would staff oversee that fence is solid and not, whatever?
Yes, when they come in for their business license, at that point, we would look at all the conditions of approval and make sure all conditions of approval were met prior to them establishing at that location.
Is your condition about the drop box acceptable?
Yes.
I don't want to put a condition in it.
He's already mentioned they put signs out to please don't leave things, but it's old habits are hard to break, I'm sure, so.
Okay, I just want to tie a bow on my concerns. So really, I'm supportive of what the Salvation Army does. I'm supportive of what the Salvation Army is proposing to do here. My rub was a disparity between what was written in the application versus what was given to us in our staff report. So really, that was what I needed clarity on, and staff was able to do that for me here today, so I'm more comfortable, but that's why we have these public meetings. But I want to make sure that I'm understanding the reason that we are considering this as a special use permit is because church services will be held there. With all of the other services, the youth program, the social service, the family support, if those things were just going to happen on their own without a church service, this would be, we would not be hearing this. This would have been an application that would have just been processed. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a pretty blanket statement. Lee Plemmel, Community Development Director for the record. And I have the permitted uses up here. That's a pretty broad statement, but this is general office. Offices are permitted by right, so if they had offices open in office hours like the office where in the neighborhood they were talking about that has counseling, that's a permitted use. You don't have to come for a special use permit for that. And so any type of use that goes into an office, that's true. Community clubhouse is another permitted use. Library is another permitted use in this zoning district. Multifamily apartments are another permitted use, all of which do not require a special use permit. So there are a lot of uses, and so yes, it is the church portion of it, which includes the childcare, which is a conditional use in that, and those sort of programs, those daycare things that require the special use permit.
Any further public comment? Bring it back to the commission for a motion or further discussion. Commissioner Tingle.
Do you have a question, did you say?
In regards to the children program, I see that there's parking lots and so forth. Is there going to be a designated area for outside play?
We will take the kids outside regularly, not as much, but if you look here, it is our plan. We're going to work with the counseling center too, because they're using our parking lot. So we're going to have to talk to them about that. But if you look at the parking lot that's connected to Pratt, we will put up a couple cones right there to keep traffic from coming in, and that's where we will take the children at this point. Later on, we may want to come back and see if we can get a playground for them. But at first, we want to purchase the building and before we could do anything like that.
I believe the parking lot right behind it is kind of separate. You can come in around that, right? So, I mean, that's the area you're talking about kind of using.
The area that's connected to Pratt, you
right.
got the main building and the parking lot, if you come straight back and you go this way, there's all that area right there that we can put up some cones to keep traffic out while we have kids out.
And you've always got that big field right across the street. That's where our kids used to play Little League. Across the street is a vacant field, I believe.
Is there?
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right, thank you.
Mr. Tingle.
Yes, I would like to make a motion. I move to approve SUP-18-108, a special use permit request to allow a church use in the general office zoning district located at 911 East 2nd Street and 211 South Pratt Avenue, APNs 004-092-24 and -28, based on the ability to make the required findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
Along with the...
Are you adding the condition, I have some wording for your consideration, that no donation box shall be located on site, although food donations may be accepted at the site?
Thank you.
I'll second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Good luck. We'll let them clear out. Okay. Turn the page. Moving on. E3 MPA-18-109 for possible action to adopt a resolution making a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors regarding a master plan amendment to change a master plan land use designated from Industrial I to Community Regional C-RC Commercial on property located at 1588 Hot Springs Road, APN 008-123-23. Oh.
Mr. Chairman, Ben Johnson, Deputy District Attorney for the record. As it's come to my attention as counsel for the commission that an individual related to this action item may have contacted a majority of the commission or all members of the commission regarding this project. This is not a conflict of interest that needs to be disclosed. This is not a statutory violation. There's been no walking quorum, serial communication, or deliberation by the board on this item. I'm not required to make this disclosure. However, out of the benefit of the public and interest of transparency, I wanted to make that statement for the record.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hope Sullivan. The applicant is seeking to redesignate a 3.94 acre property currently designated on the master plan as industrial to community regional commercial, as well as to rezone the property from general industrial to tourist commercial. I will be presenting items E3 and E4 together. However, you will act on those separately. The subject property is to the east of the hot springs. This action, if approved, will essentially revert the property to the designations in place before the redesignation in 2015. So the question is, what's changed since 2015 that staff's now before you saying, let's go back? In 2015, the thinking was that given the freeway had removed access from Old Hot Springs to the west and had not incorporated on and off ramps in the area, this would not be an area where commercial uses could thrive. The commercial uses, though, have thrived there since 2015. In 2015, Sassafras Restaurant took occupancy of the vacant restaurant to the west of the hot springs. In 2016, In 2016, the Hot Springs remodeled their bathrooms. In 2017, Shoe Tree Brewery Company constructed a brewery and tasting room to the west of Sassafras, and currently the Hot Springs has a building permit pending for a new spa. So I have put up the aerial, the photo that shows you the Hot Springs just to the west of the subject property. In both 2016 and in 2016 and 2018, there were 3 major project reviews for RV parks in this area. 2 of those major project reviews were to place RV parks to the rear of Sassafras, and the third major project review was to place an RV resort on the subject property. With respect to master plan amendments, the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. In considering your recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, you need to make 4 required findings in the affirmative: compliance with the master plan, land use compatibility, responsiveness to changed conditions, and that promotes a desired pattern of orderly growth. Staff has reviewed each of those 4 findings in the staff report and was able to make those in the affirmative. With respect to the zoning, Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors regarding a zoning map amendment. In considering a zoning map amendment, the Planning Commission will consider 3 findings of fact: compliance with the master plan, land use compatibility, and whether or not the rezoning will negatively impact existing or planned public services and facilities or public health, welfare, and safety. Again, staff has reviewed each of those findings in the staff report and was able to make each of those in the affirmative. Having said that, staff believes the expansion of the commercial area will improve the success of the entire commercial area here while not negatively impacting the industrial uses that are located across the street and nearby. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend approval of both requests to the Board of Supervisors. Angela Foos with Loomis and Associates is present representing the applicant, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Just to reinforce and clarify, I was here at the time, we're just putting this back to where it was before we changed it at the request of the applicant in 15, correct?
At the end of the day, that will be the action, but you need to make the findings of fact to get there, and included in the findings of fact are a change of conditions for the master plan amendment. So that's why I think it's very important that the record reflect that the assumptions made in 2015 have not been realized, and it can be a viable area for commercial uses.
And do I need to read ZMA 1810, since I didn't at the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me go ahead and do that. E4 ZMA-18-110 for possible action to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors regarding a zoning map amendment to change the zoning from general industrial GI to tourist commercial on property located at 1588 Hot Springs Road, APN 008-123-23. Thank you. Any other questions for staff?
I have a question. So is the basic purpose of this zoning request from industrial to commercial is to allow for a RV park in this location?
I'm going to answer in a bit of an abstract way. Okay, sorry. Okay, so what do I always say? When we think about zoning, we think about 2 things. How can you use your land, and what is your dimensional criteria? Although there is information within your packet indicating that the intended use is that of an RV park, the commission needs to consider all the uses that would be allowed under the tourist commercial zoning district. And should the RV park not be realized, any of those uses or conditional uses in the tourist commercial zoning district could be the established use.
Okay, so based on that explanation, if this were to be considered for an RV park, the intersection of Research and Old Hot Springs Road isn't exactly conducive to an RV park. Traffic on Research Way, that's predominantly office right now. And so, as I recall, the grading and the drop-off from Hot Springs Road onto that lot is relatively significant. So I guess my concern is that if we're looking at the potential for an RV park by changing the zoning from industrial to commercial tourist, then there has to be some sort of consideration at whatever time we get there for changes to that particular intersection, because it's not exactly, if you have a toy hauler that's 33 feet long, getting in and out of that area is going to be pretty interesting. So that's just my observation from years of walking that route.
Other questions for staff? What is the history of where the road is cut off, that as you come down towards that? If you go to the overall picture, you know, there's that other road that goes further up. There. The one, what is that? Wedco. It's blocked at the other end, and it's been blocked for years. I just don't know why that was ever taken out or no longer used. I'm just curious. I didn't know if there was any history on that.
I don't have history on that. So maybe somebody in the audience does.
sorry.
The two large parcels that are directly to the north, what are they zoned?
On page,
Directly to the north is
yeah.
PC.
On page 4 of your packet, you'll see directly to the north is PC, and I believe that's to accommodate the airport. And if you look behind Sassafras, you'll see the tourist commercial, and that exhibit is labeled existing zoning.
Was that the area we considered another RV thing at one point? Or at the end where that dirt's been built up and all that, there was going to be a long stay up to 30 days, something, whatever?
Correct. In 2015 or 16, you considered a special use permit for an RV park there, and that application was withdrawn after there was an appeal of your decision to the board, and the applicant withdrew the application in between your action and what would have been the board's appeal.
Because I believe we put some restrictions on the length of stay and okay. Staff. Would the applicant like to come forward, please?
Thank you. For the record, Angela Foos with Loomis and Associates, here today representing the applicant. I do have a PowerPoint presentation, but I think I'm going to forego that and maybe just go through a couple of points just based on the information I'm hearing from you guys.
You've seen the conditions of approval and you're accepting, or no, excuse me, cancel.
So a couple things. One is kind of the history of this property. Many years ago, it was actually used as an RV park, and that was probably, 50 or 60 years in length that it was used as an RV park. The difference is now is once they come forward with an RV park, there are some very specific code requirements, and I think that would address some of the concerns about grading and making sure they have adequate access and that there's no issues with trailers entering the site. So those issues are taken care of through the code requirements. If they have an RV park that is just 30 days or less, they can go straight to a building permit and there's no special use permit. However, if they do want to go longer than 30 days, they do have to go back before you through a special use permit process where you can review the project. One thing that's changed, because we are talking about a zone change in a master plan, not a specific project. So one thing we look at is how has the area changed as to why we would warrant this zone change in master plan amendment. And some of the big things are those uses that Hope was mentioning, the Sassafras restaurant that's been in place for the last couple years, as well as the brewery that's been in place for the last year or so, and all the improvements that are currently being made to the Hot Springs Resort. So this area is definitely undergoing some transition. For a long time, it was just the Hot Springs, and that was there, for, over 100 years, but used as a commercial property for the last few decades. So I think that we're actually seeing a lot of reason to say, you know what, this area is becoming a transition area where we're seeing a lot of people, more activity, and it's a good type of activity. So what makes sense? Because the property to the west of us is already zoned for tourist commercial, it makes sense, it's logical, the two uses would be compatible. We have talked to the Hot Springs Resort owner and manager, and they're in support of this. This actually helps them, gives them a little bit more clients to bring to their facility, as well as the restaurant and the brewery. We also talked to the airport, and they didn't have any issues with it. You have an email. So there was no concerns from the airport, which is directly to the north of the property. So kind of based on all those changes and the feedback from the neighborhood, we feel that this is definitely an appropriate use. And it is going back to the original tourist commercial zoning that was in place for many, many years, up until about 3 years ago. So that, unless you have specific questions, I'll leave it at that.
Questions for the applicant? And you mentioned you had a PowerPoint, or you don't need it?
I did, and I'll forego it unless you have any specific questions.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Public comment. At this time, we'll take any public comment on this item. Please state your name and...
Yeah, I have a comment. My name is Don Langson, and I own a parcel on Hot Springs, or now Old Hot Springs Road, just up the street from this particular parcel. And my piece is also zoned tourist commercial, and I'm very concerned that this parcel would be returned back to tourist commercial so that its uses would be compatible with the uses on my property. I'm sorry?
You're in favor of this, then?
Yes, I am.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Just wanted to clarify that. Other public comment on this issue? Oh, state your-
I'm the middle brother Langston. Commissioners, I'm Richard Langston, and I gave the spiel the last time we changed the zoning, so maybe I won't have to go into that, but we owned the property for about 60 years, and we actually managed it from about, 79 on, and it was certainly a RV park. It was different than the RV parks of today. We wouldn't want to build one like that today, but anyway, just to make the record clear, I'm certainly in favor of the zoning change back to tourist commercial. The gentleman that bought the Hot Springs Resort from our family, the Langston family, Mark Bagish, is, like I say, I've talked to Mark, and he's in favor of the RV park because it'll be good for both properties. Also, this land has been vacant for a long time, except for my shop there that I use for bottling Tahoe mist water for about 15 years. And it was very successful until Coke and Pepsi decided to bottle their own water and kind of hurt our business. So in any event, I've been doing research and testing there for the last 10 years for my green energy company, Electrotherm, and also Langston Energy. And now it's just, actually I quit the testing, and we're actually manufacturing units, and we're into the selling stage. So we're not doing the R&D anymore, and it's just been sitting there as a kind of a warehouse. So I'm totally favorable towards changing the zoning back and getting an RV park in there. And the Langstons have, as I mentioned before, we've paid a lot of taxes over the years and millions of dollars fees, and we started with 300 acres there, and these are the few parcels that we have left. And Don and I have worked together in construction for years, so I think the zoning is a little softer between the commercial, the auto repair, and the resort. This would kind of soften the area there. I think it's the highest and best use for the property. Thank you.
You after the second at about 2 o'clock?
Yes.
That was me following.
Oh. Did you get my license plate?
Oh, you look familiar.
Okay. Well, I used to race cars, and they were always promoting that, and so got one of those faces, Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Again, Rob Joyner for the record.
Great.
Commissioners. For full disclosure, I represent both the buyer and seller on this real estate deal as a licensed real estate agent in Nevada. That's why I did reach out to the chairman to get his input. I also contacted Ms. Tingle today, spoke with her, and I was saddened to hear that Mr. Eswine, former professional planner like myself, could not be here tonight, and also Ms. Stoll, Candace Stoll, your former commissioner. But I did speak with both of them, get their input, because I wanted to know what they were hearing about this project, what they thought about it, just because I do know them. I know Mr. Sattler, and I've known a bit about Ms. Tingle over the years. Having said that, to answer a question that you had a few moments ago, to the north is airport property, but here about 25 years ago, maybe less, the FAA, we got a grant and put that into open space for the clear zone, so that will never be developed. It will be an area, as you know, that's the predominant takeoff area. They land from the east, they take off to the west, and that is a clear zone. So until you get over to the property you discussed a few moments ago with the other consideration for an RV park, that area is open and should never be developed. So I think Manager Moen of the airport did send you a note that he's in support, probably because of that. It doesn't affect the airport in any way. So as a longtime member of the community, former planner in the community, and knowing the former RV park and the code compliance issues we had over the years and chasing that around, I think the best thing that ever happened was when Mr. and Mr. Langston both agreed to take out that RV park, and they sold the hot springs, and it's just coming back full circle. It's just amazing to see that. I remember before Research Way went through, and the old Hot Springs Road was the way in there before the freeway. And this, I think, just thinking of the tourist commercial uses that we didn't think would exist anymore when the freeway came through, but they're coming back, and it's just wonderful to see. So for that reason, I'm in full support of the project, and thank you very much.
I just would like to add, I referenced it briefly, and it was referenced during our conversation. One of our planners received a letter which was forwarded to us from the Carson City Airport Authority, does not object to the proposed master plan zoning property located on Hot Springs, signed by Kenneth Moen, the manager. So the public knows that we did receive that letter of recommendation, or not objection, I should say. Any other public comment on this issue? Bring it back to us. Discussion or a motion? Commissioner Preston. We do these one at a time, correct? Yeah, okay.
Oh, before you make a motion, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, before you make this motion, I just feel compelled to make a comment about this particular, these two items, is that I understand that going from industrial to commercial tourist is a better plan. I appreciate that wholeheartedly. Frankly, I prefer four-legged animals to two-legged ones, and I really am going to miss seeing the coyotes and the rabbits and the birds and every critter that I see when I walk that route, which I used to do quite frequently, and much appreciated all of the wildlife, and understanding that you can't sometimes fly in the face of progress. I just want to say that grudgingly, I will vote how I feel on this particular item, but I did want to make that statement.
I move to adopt resolution number 2018-PC-R4 and recommending to the Board of Supervisors approval of MPA-18-109, a master plan amendment to change the land use designation from industrial to commercial, to community regional commercial on property located at 1588 Old Hot Springs Road, APN 008-123-23, based on the findings contained in the staff report.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Borders. We have a second from Commissioner Borders. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Condition we don't see this again in 3 years.
Can you put that condition on?
Go ahead. You want to continue?
Sure.
I move to recommend to the Board of Supervisors approval of ZMA-18-110, a zoning map amendment to change the zoning from general industrial to tourist commercial on property located at 1588 Old Hot Springs Road, APN 008-123-23, based on findings contained in the staff report.
I will second that also. You want to take a break?
Do we want to take a break? If you'd like to, we can take a couple-minute break.
Okay. It's going to be 30 minutes.
Well, we're going to take a 5-minute break. call it back to order for the Planning Commission. Next item, MPA-17-185, for possible action to consider a modification recommended by the Board of Supervisors relative to the master plan amendment to create the Blackstone Ranch specific plan area for 26.89 acres of the existing Lopper Ranch specific plan area located at the east end of Railroad Street between Solomon Road and US Highway 580, APN 010-051-44.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hope Sullivan, Planning Manager. I'll point out to the Commission you have two pieces of late material concerning this matter. One is the minutes of the board meeting when the board reviewed the application, and that was August 2nd. They're draft minutes. I'm sorry, they're not draft minutes. I got you the signed approved minutes, so those are the official minutes. You also have a memo from me, which I'll speak more specifically to in just a couple minutes. By way of background, the subject 26 or 27 acre property is at the end of Railroad Drive, and I have a vicinity map posted for you. At the Planning Commission meeting of May 30th, the Commission passed a resolution by a vote of 5-2 recommending approval of the Blackstone specific plan. The Blackstone Ranch specific plan. As part of the Planning Commission approval, the Planning Commission recommended that second access could be emergency only, provided the level of service at the intersection of Solomon and Railroad met city standards. At its meeting of August 2nd, the Board of Supervisors voted that the site be served by two full vehicular accesses with the one not utilizing railroad being initially improved to a standard different than the city standard and then improved to the city standard prior to build out. So what does that mean? We'll remember that in 2006, we have our LAMPA specific plan, and everything in that blue boundary is subject to the LAMPA specific plan. Prior to any development within this blue boundary, the applicant must have a specific plan approved and capture the zoning. So the way I explained it to you and I explained it to the board is the specific plan's kind of the rules of the game. What are our rules going to be? And then what happens is as development occurs, those rules are implemented. So it's all the policy statements for development of this I'm going to call it a 27 acre area. What the board said is, well, we're supposed to have a road that goes to 5th. We're supposed to have a road that goes over to Firebox per the 2006 specific plan. We also have a fire code that tells us after 31 units, you need to have the secondary access for fire purposes. We also have a part of our development standards that says whenever you have a subdivision, which by definition means you're yielding 4 lots or more, you need to have 2 points of access. So the board said, we believe that this will yield 4 lots or more, and we should be meeting the city standard, and it should have 2 public accesses on day 1. Having said that, the board recognized that access may change depending on development activity to the north of the linear park. So the board said, you don't have to build it to city standard on day 1. The road has to be there before you build that first house. But you can build it to a different standard. But prior to build out, i.e. getting to that last house, that road needs to be built to city standards. So what I have presented in my memo that came in as late material is proposed wording. But my wording's actually more aggressive than the board, so I want to be entirely honest with you that what I'm putting before you is not exactly what the board suggested. The board asked that you consider a recommendation that the road be improved to city standards prior to build out. So if hypothetically we're looking at a 100 lot subdivision, it means prior to the permit for that 100th house. The board also said we could consider bonding. In discussing it with my colleagues in both transportation and engineering, we felt it would make more sense and it would give us more latitude, if you will, to get to have the road improved to city standards at a point before that last house. And so what we put forward to you initially was at a 50% mark. We said 50%, let's get the road upgraded to meet city standards. Recognizing the board said not till 100%, but we put out 50%. In discussions with the applicant was sympathetic to our concern that we didn't want to wait till that last house. But they felt 50% was somewhat aggressive. And so in the discussions with the applicant, the staff felt we could support 75% build out. So at 75% build out, the road is built to city standards or is bonded for. Having said that, the road has to be 100% complete to city standards at build out if they were to bond, which bonding involves 150% of the cost of the improvement. And no matter what, on day one, you have a road available to the public that does not rely on railroad. So I want to just kind of go through the implementation steps. I have that on the board for you, because this is kind of, I think, the thought process, and I want to make sure the words capture this that are in the memo, because I know I talked with Lee Harder, and he was concerned I wasn't capturing this concept. So since you haven't lived with it as much as I have, I appreciate your input. Okay, so the idea is first we implement this specific plan, which I'm going to keep calling the rules of the game. What are our rules, right? Then what will happen is the applicant will come in with a conceptual plan. Conceptual plan is a drawing showing how they propose to subdivide the land. That plan is reviewed by the staff. The staff meets with the applicant, and we tell the applicant what our comments are going to be when this gets to tentative map. Ideally, the applicant then takes those comments and incorporates it into a tentative subdivision map. You've seen tentative maps. The tentative maps go to the Planning Commission for review and recommendation. And I should go back a second to step 2. At the time of conceptual map, the staff's going to look at the rules of the game and make sure that conceptual map is addressing all those rules of the game, including that road that needs to be there on day one for public access. So then we go to our tentative subdivision map, and that goes to Planning Commission for review and recommendation to the board, adoption by the board. You will also be looking at all those rules of the game to make sure they're complying with all those rules, including that road on day one. Board will do the same thing, and you'll be making a recommendation to the board. After the tentative subdivision map is approved, the developer then builds their infrastructure. They bring in their water and sewer, they do their stormwater improvements, they build their roads. The road to the lesser standard, which we're utilizing the rural road standard, would be constructed at that time along with those improvements. Once those improvements are constructed, the applicant can bring forward a final map to the board. It does not come to you. The board reviews all the requirements of the tentative map, verifies all those requirements have been met, and then can approve a final map. When a final map is recorded, that's when the lots lawfully exist. You can buy and sell those lots, you can start building houses on those lots. So keep in mind, before we even got to this final map, we're building our infrastructure. As they're building their houses on the lots, we're improving the roads. But at first, it's improved to the rural standard because the board said it can be improved to a lesser standard initially. But the staff's recommendation is then when you hit 75% build out, you either build it to the urban standard or you stop. Having said that, you can bond for building it to the urban standard, but it has to be constructed to the urban standard prior to build out. So if you were to bond at 75% and say, you know what, all this construction traffic is just going to beat up everything, let us just get these houses built and then we'll finish the road. For us to say yes, they have to bond for 150% of the value of those improvements. And we would have the contract, the bonding contract, drafted so that those improvements had to occur prior to total build-out. So that's what I'm trying to capture in this memorandum, and that is the staff's recommendation, is that rather than the board's recommendation of the road being improved to city standards, or I should say urban standards at build-out, the staff is concerned that a future builder could choose to walk away from that last house and not improve the road. And so we want to get it improved earlier or have it bonded for earlier in the process. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Oh, let me back up a second. Okay, so you passed a resolution, you made a recommendation to the board on this specific plan. When you make a recommendation to the board, if the board modifies your recommendation, we bring the modification back to you for your review and for your comment. That's how the code reads. I think it would be appropriate for you to make a motion so it's clear to the board exactly where the commission stood on things. I'd also ask that you specifically speak to the 75% versus full build out, because I want the board to understand what the commission's thinking was on that, and I want to understand what your thinking is on that as well. But that is why only this piece of the specific plan is before you today. Michelle Ramba with Rubicon is here representing the applicant, and I'm happy to answer questions.
So, for layman clarification, we're looking at 112 houses at 50%. It would have been at 56 houses. At 75%, you're looking at 84 houses is where these kick in. My number one concern and question, and maybe it would help it get done sooner, I would imagine the builder is responsible for that road until it is brought to city standard and turned over to the city. Who's going to be responsible if that roughed out road starts falling apart? Is the city going to have to fix it, or is the applicant going to have to fix it?
We've talked about that internally, and we don't believe the city would, our recommendation to the board, and it's the board's decision, but based on existing staff and our understanding of the situation, we would not recommend acceptance of that road until it was built to urban standards.
Bring that up and make sure that was clarified.
But if we don't accept it, how do we make sure it stays to the rural standard?
It won't stay to the rural standard. It needs to be upgraded to the urban standard.
No, I'm saying in the beginning.
In the beginning, at the time of final map, just like we do with a lot of common open space and things like that, we would assign the responsibility to a homeowners association or a similar entity.
But if that road became unsafe or something, would we have any right to go in and tell them it has to be redone, fixed up, repaired, since they're sending public people back and forth over?
Stephen Pote with Development Engineering for the record. So there are standards that we could reference at the time of tentative map to give a concrete measurement for what the quality of the road would have to be. And also, just for the record, the rural standard has the same width of driving surface and the same thickness of asphalt and base. It's really just drainage and sidewalk improvements that are different.
It's gutter, sidewalk, and finish kind of stuff.
Correct.
But I would be more comfortable to make sure it's addressed in there that the applicant is responsible for that until it's brought to city standard and turned over.
No, the point I think that I was trying to make was that at day one, when the first house goes in, this road is going to be built to the rural standard.
Right.
But where the city's not going to accept it until sometime in the future. Or we get to 50 homes and we stop building and the road starts to come apart, who's going to be responsible for maintaining the road so that we don't end up with a road that nobody uses and we put all the traffic back on railroad?
So, Stephen, for Development Engineering, again, for the record, it would basically be treated as a private road. So in other areas of the city, there are private roads where a homeowners association is required to maintain it. The difference being that potentially at tentative map, we could require a specific standard to be maintained.
I would be, or make sure it's in the homeowner, whatever, that is very clear that road needs to be maintained until the city takes it.
The problem with that is your homeowners association is not going to be turned over until the developer gets to a certain number of units, which is probably 75. So then in that case, then the builder is in essence the homeowners association. But somewhere along the way, if we're going to do this, we need to make sure that that road is maintained. Otherwise, we've just made ourselves feel good and we haven't solved the situation at all.
Again, what we're doing here is we're looking, and I'm sorry if I sound trite, I'm going to sound trite, the rules of the game. So what are we thinking about in terms of access? When Planning Commission first looked at this, Planning Commission said, sure, that second access can be emergency only, provided we have a level service at Railroad and Salomon of such and such that meets city standards. Board said, no, you need 2 public accesses on day 1. But we recognize one might not be permanent, and so you can build it to a lesser standard, provided it meets city standard at the time of build-out. When we get to things like who will own roads, and let's just be hypothetical for a second. Let's pretend the intent was private roads, because you have the exact same situation where the developer runs the HOA until he turns it over to the HOA. We tend to handle that at tentative map. The tentative map identifies that you need to create, and Vintage is a really good example. You'll all remember, Hope remembers, that there were a lot of conditions there that the HOA or similar entity will maintain the landscaping, will maintain the drainage ways, will maintain the roads, and so on and so forth. So all of that gets sort of flushed out more specifically at the time of tentative map when you can have conditions of approval. You just had a situation where you had a master plan amendment and the chair accidentally said, do you agree with the conditions of approval? You don't have conditions of approval with the master plan amendment. We look at our wording. So our wording creates a performance standard. You will have 2 roads that meet public access, or that the public has access to. Then when we get to the tentative map is when we can flesh out the specifics, and then when the tentative map transitions to a final map is when they have to produce the CC&Rs. They have to produce the HOA document, and we make sure all of that wording has been incorporated. I review final maps all the time that have notes right on the final map. In fact, I just kicked one out because the note wasn't clear enough, that says the maintenance of this improvement, the maintenance of that improvement shall be the responsibility of the homeowners association. So I think we'll be there, but we're a little premature, in my opinion, to house all of that in a specific plan.
To clarify a little bit, we weren't overly comfortable with not having a secondary road. We understood that it would be at 4 houses because the emergency at least would go in access, so there would be an avenue in or out. But we would kick in at 4 houses, so, yeah, thank you.
So just for clarification's sake, day 1 before a single, is the slab on grade? I'm sorry. Because I'm trying to figure out, okay, before a foundation is poured, before anything is done, there will be 2 access, ingress, egress into that area. So not all of the construction traffic is going to be down Railroad Drive, right?
There's a slight clarification to that. That's okay. So look back at my list. Look at number 4. What are we doing in number 4? We're building infrastructure. So you're going to be building roads. When you're building roads on that 27 acres, I can go back to our map. There's only one way to get to that 27 acres till you build that next road. So the construction vehicles and so on that are associated with that road construction, infrastructure construction, until that second public road, or public, I'm going to call it public access because I don't want to imply the city's going to accept it before it's improved. But until that exists, the construction traffic that does the infrastructure does not have another means to get to that site. Having said that, you are correct that once that final map's recorded, and you cannot start building houses until you have that final map, that road will be in place.
But in theory, they could wait to do that road till the last thing of the infrastructure is put in.
Think of it as 2 roads, even though it's probably the same road. The road that's there before the first house is ever built is a road that is built to rural standards. It doesn't have curb and gutter, but it's there. The public can drive on it. Okay, then prior, and my recommendation is prior to 75% build out, that road that was built to rural standards is now improved to an urban standard because that's what would have been required at the beginning. But the board said you can build it to a lesser standard because we know it, by the time you get to the point where you're ready to make it an urban standard, there may be a different alignment. Because
Can we require that road be put in at the start of the infrastructure improvement rather than at any point he determines when it goes in?
You can certainly advise the board that that's your recommendation.
In other words, the road goes in, and then the sewer and water and all the construction trucks and all are using that, using both maybe, but I mean, instead of, because otherwise, what's to keep them from saying, okay, we're going to run everything down here, and then when we're ready to pour the first slab, we'll cut that road in. Timing-wise, I would be more comfortable if that road was in there, maybe not the first day, but early on when they start, I don't know how we would word that.
Again, I think that's okay. I will caution you, and you didn't go there, but in case somebody wants to go there, I'm going to caution you on calling out specific routes for construction, because people use GPS and so on and so forth, and the enforcement ability of that's really difficult. But if you feel like this road should not just be there before the first house, but I'm thinking now about how to measure that, you know what I mean?
I'm saying an early feasibility somewhere, and maybe they need to get in there first and then do a couple things, and then just to have it's just something to consider,
Right, and I think if you want to send that message to the board, that would be fine.
On the bonding, what's the normal time limit?
Typically 18 months, but in this case, because we're suggesting the rules of the game require that the road be completed to urban standards prior to build-out, it would shrink. We would not allow the 18 months.
Okay.
And maybe kind of what we were asking for could be worked out between you and transport those folks and whatever, to something reasonable. But I just don't want to see it waiting till the very last minute or whatever to put that thing in, if it's feasible, possible. Commissioner Preston.
Since a second road is going to be required as part of the infrastructure, couldn't that second road, not on the railroad side, actually be a construction entrance to bring in the infrastructure?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, it could be. The longer answer is I don't want to sign up for something that I can't commit to enforcement on. People have GPS, people are innocently going to go to the site, following their GPS and going on railroad and not realizing that's available access.
Sorry, but if the majority of the construction activity could come off of that.
I'm not going to worry about it.
I know, I'm the only reason I'm worried about it is because traffic in and out of Railroad Drive coming onto Salomon, off of Railroad, especially if you're trying to make a left-hand turn, I mean, that gets a little bit dicey on a good day. But if you've got a lot of construction vehicles in and out of there, that's going to be somewhat problematic, and that's kind of why I'm thinking if there's more traffic going on the unoccupied section than through that residential area, if that can be encouraged or, whatever that it's going to take, then I think that would probably cause a little less anxiety for some of the folks that are probably sitting out here waiting to make public comment. So that's just my comment.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm wondering if that's a better item for tentative map, because what I'm thinking off the top of my head is as part of tentative map, you can ask for a sign directing construction, traffic, things like that. We're in the rules of the game right now, and I think that, I know you do.
I'm playing the devil's advocate. Do you want all those big trucks coming out right by the school, closer to the school than they are on railroad? I mean, you got to look at the balance, and I mean, that's done through construction.
No, if they're taking it to Fifth Street, though.
No, they're not going to Fifth Street. They're coming.
We don't know where they're going.
Yeah, we don't know where they're going yet.
That's somewhat problematic.
I'm just saying, I'm just discussing this so the supervisors or whatever know we did discuss it, that kind of our feelings. Again, it's common sense, because they're going to have to build some road in off a railroad to get into that property as well. So, anyway. Justin.
As someone that has been a general contractor and a developer, it has not been unheard of for me as a contractor to actually have to build a construction access to bring in things like C90 and things like this that are actually not conducive to a neighborhood like we have as railroad. So my question would be, is on the tentative map, that would be something that they can make a construction entrance. I mean, I've had union and non-union entrances. Why can't you have a construction entrance? So I think that's something that I think that somehow, I know this is something I think we'd feel more comfortable about on this one, so.
Well, we will be able to address that when we get to the tentative map part. So I think, right. Anything else? Anything else?
The only thing I'm still messing with is the trigger on the bond. I would, if, in my experience with development and developers in other states and who are not nearly as honest and trustworthy as those in Nevada, a developer's pretty much covered his costs at 75% build out. So his profit is in the last 25%. If things aren't going well, that's also a good place to walk away. I would like to move that, even to 65 or 70% would still be at the area where the developer's going to have to push through to get it done that way because of the bond, as opposed to 75. Now, I don't know necessarily what the number is. 50 was okay with me. I think 75 is too much, but 70 may not be, or 65 or something like that. I think that's one of the other issues that we need to finally decide on before we recommend this forward.
Keep in mind, 25% is 28 homes. Any more questions for staff? The applicant would like to come up and add anything, or?
Oops, shocked myself. Good evening. For the record, my name is Michelle Rambo. I'm with Rubicon Design Group, representing the applicant. We are in agreement with the 75% for the trigger. As Hope said, the secondary access will be there, will be built before the first unit is there. We would be open to considering condition of approval later for where in the timing that happens, and construction versus non-construction traffic. We're open to that during the tentative map stage. Just to kind of update you, since the last time we were here, we did meet with the neighborhood to discuss some of their concerns, and a lot of those are going to be worked out through the tentative map process, and we will be meeting with them again as we move forward while we're designing the subdivision. We do not currently know the number of lots for the subdivision. We also don't know the alignment for the secondary access road, so as we move forward with the preparing the tentative map, those will come into better focus. But we are in total agreement with the 75%, and I'm here if you have any questions.
We appreciate, and you're working with and hopefully continuing to work with the neighbors out there.
Absolutely.
And that's greatly appreciated.
Good.
Okay. I think we're good. Public comment.
I'm Rick Riondo. I live on Railroad Drive. I have 3 pages that I typed up in preparation for this, and I think I'm ahead of the game. Notice, though, that when the first proposal came through, Railroad Drive was the only access being promoted at the time. Scared the bejeebers out of me. I live on Railroad. I've been there for almost 3 decades. I like the peace and quiet. The original study predicted that there would be 1,066 additional vehicles per day on Railroad Drive. I read that and went, what? Wait a minute. Who wants that in front of their house? And I was assured by my supervisor, well, that doesn't happen all at once. It's spread throughout the day. I get that. So I get to be miserable all day long. I understand. It works out really well. So my first approach with the Board of Supervisors was we need a secondary access. And what I'm listening to here is pretty vague still. Yes, there's going to be a second. Where? Where is this secondary access going to be? My understanding is that the best thing that would happen would be an access all the way up to 5th Street. Go over Linear Park, go up behind the houses that line Salomon and the little subdivisions along the way, and go up that way to 5th Street. Like, perfect, that's just wonderful. Except I understand that Mr. Lampa is pretty adamant about not selling any more of his pasture. That he told my supervisor that he's not done ranching. That his son doesn't want to ranch, wait till he dies and his son will sell him the property. I go, okay, what does that mean? That leaves then accesses hooking up to these little mini streets that hook up to Salomon. I go, what? Fairview is a possibility, of course. And I think if people talk to the businesses that were there, maybe something could be worked out. I don't know. The industrial part of this area is relatively new, and they're doing just fine, and they're happy with, from what I understand, happy with the way things are. So I understand that there have been conversations about Firebox. Firebox comes out right out in front of Fremont Elementary School. Now, I don't have PowerPoint presentations, but I brought pictures, and I would love to share these with you when we get done here, but there is congestion on Firebox, and it extends into Salomon every morning and every afternoon when the parents are picking up their children and dropping off their children at the school. It's incredible. It's amazing. The pickup time in the afternoon around 3:15 the congestion is stunning. And I understand that, no, because Firebox is so close to Railroad, we don't have to do a traffic study. Railroad doesn't have a school at the end of its street. Firebox does. And you know what? There's an awful lot of little kids running around elementary schools. The Board of Supervisors just approved it that the school can be expanded to include 300 more students. I'm going, oh, that's good. It's okay with me. Their playground goes back behind my home on the other side of Linear Park. I don't mind hearing children playing. I had neighbors who moved because they didn't want to hear children playing. Other old cranky retired people like myself. And as us old cranky people move away or die, because that's what we do, young families are moving in. Railroad is full of little kids right now. There are kids walking to school and walking back and forth to school. I watch kids playing in the cul-de-sac right across, watch this, from my office where I sit at my computer in my home. And I watched 2 scooters come out yesterday, shoot right out into the middle of Railroad and spin around and do with kids about that tall, right? Really busy with themselves, as is appropriate when you're that tall and you're a little kid. What happens when the traffic picks up? And what scares the heck out of me, I, with a couple of my other neighbors, went and visited some of the supervisors independently, and one of them told me that Railroad can never be used for construction. I said, what? What are you saying? Nope. He says, you can't. Your fears are not justified. And I said, what? Explain that. It's zoned for residential, not for construction or industrial. And I went, really? He was wrong, I think. I believe he was wrong. Because everything that I've heard after that, yeah, you're going to have some construction there. And wherever this secondary access is going to be put in, you're going to have to use Railroad to get some initial construction vehicles down there. That has to happen. I don't own Railroad. You do. The city does. I don't own the pasture. This development outfit does. And I'm going, oh, geez. So where are you going to put in the other access? It cannot be. It just cannot be at Firebox. That's absurd. So what does that leave? Depot? Yeah, And there's a clear shot right into the pasture from Depot that could cut right down. You'd have to talk to Mr. Lompa again to pick up some of this property. But it would cut right down, right through these guys' mailboxes. But if I lived in that neighborhood, I would curse me right now. Depot is probably not a real good idea either, but it's better than Firebox. Fifth Street is the way to go. I think that's what I would promote. But we're not talking specifics until there's a tentative plan. Is that correct? Oh. Yeah. We're waiting for a tentative plan for the specific location of the second access.
For the benefit of the commission, the board specifically did not identify where the connection should occur to allow the applicant to identify where that connection will occur, and that would appear on the conceptual map and the tentative map. Right now, there's a performance standard of 2 access that are both available to the public.
So the tentative map is a term in NRS. That's the plan. That will be the development plan. It's called a tentative
And
map.
it doesn't exist yet.
Right.
What did I get in the Blackstone, Blackstone packet of, there's maps throughout the whole thing, but there's no second access. That's when railroad was it.
If you look at the list I've posted, you'll see we're at the very beginning. What we're doing right now is identifying what are the rules of the game. It's a specific plan. They cannot come in with a proposal to develop until the board identifies what the rules are.
Okay, and so one of those rules is that secondary access that's built at least to rural standards, and the debate is urban standards eventually. Say somewhere after 31 homes I've heard, 41 homes I've heard, 50% I've heard, and now 75%, I get it too. And I agree with the concern that was expressed. Hey, I'll build 75% of the homes and then quit, and then leave. I'm not fixing any road for anything. That bothers me, because the primary access then goes back to railroad. My street, 1,066 vehicles. And no traffic study needs to be done for Firebox. If Firebox is chosen, I would insist that yes, a traffic study be done there. And you will see that it's crowded. You can't get in there. There are times of day that it's impossible. Firebox I would rule out immediately. Depot perhaps. Fifth Street, absolutely, I'll go that route. If you can get cooperation from the owner for what is there. That's it. Like I say, you guys have destroyed my whole 3 pages and 6 hours worth of preparations for this. I'm grateful. I am very grateful. And I will spell Riondo on this thing for you so that you can.
Again, like staff has said, we're trying to get from 1 to 1 so they can get to 2.
I understand a lot better now. Thank you very much for your patience.
Other public comment?
Lee Harder, I'm a resident of the existing Lampa Estates area. We're very happy that the board required fully functional secondary access. But the issue here is when the second access must be upgraded to urban standards with the sidewalk, curbs, gutters, things like that. Initially, in the August 22 memo from Hope, she had 50%. When 50% of the project is developed, then we will require it being brought to urban standards. Blackstone comes in, chats with her, and all of a sudden it's raised to 75%. And one of the grounds is it provides the city with enforcement feasibility, sometimes known as administrative feasibility. What is this? Let's suppose they propose 100 houses. 50% build out would be 50 houses. they would build the secondary access to urban standards at 50 houses, according to the 22nd of August memo. At only 49 houses being built, the developer could walk away, and that's it, and leave a crummy rural road as the secondary access. I think most people, and I agree, at 50% build out, the developer would want to finish the development and build the road. But the problem is, it's a mystery road. Nobody knows where it's going to be. There are 3 possible access roads in there. Firebox, which Mr. Riondo has stated has a lot of problems, but that's the shortest access to the development, and probably the most likely, and probably the one a developer would prefer, because it's not going to cost a lot of money. We're looking at probably less than a block, or maybe a block long. So that's probably the preferred access, but there'll be a lot of criticism if that's the one they propose. The other possible access is Depot, a little further north on Solomon. We don't know where this road's going to be. 5th Street is the best access. It's quite a distance from the northern border of the development. That's going to be costly, and it's going to cost millions of dollars to build that probably half-a-mile stretch up to urban standards. Under the proposal in the most recent memo, if it's at 75%, they have to build it to urban standards. The developer could build it to 74 houses, look around and say, I'm going to have to spend millions of dollars to finish this development. I'm walking. What's that leave us with? A crummy access road, a private road, if you will, of questionable who's going to maintain it. So it's important we know where the access road is before the Planning Commission and the board give a license to whoever develops it, that at 75% you have to spend a lot of money. At this point, since we don't know where the access road is going to be, leave it at the initial proposal of the planning staff, 50% build out. Roughly, whatever, it's 112 houses or 100, 50% of the build out, then you have to build it to urban standards. The Planning Commission and the board can always raise that to 75% later on. But if you agree now in this black box, mystery road, we'll let you do it at 75%, but we don't know where it's going to be. So keep the initial staff recommendation requiring the road at 50%. Once we know where the road is and it meets all the rest of the criteria, then it can be raised, but it can't be taken back. If you say 75%, then you build the road, you can't take it back and make them do it earlier. I like to hear all of this discussion about that's the main issue today. I'm very happy to hear the discussion of a construction road prior to build out and what is build out. I'd sure as heck like to see it while they're building, or have it ready prior to even working on infrastructure. Obviously, since a bridge has to be built over the ditch, the linear ditch right there, they're going to have to be on both sides, using railroad for construction, at least for the bridge. But I understand that will be settled at a tentative map. Thank you.
Other public comment? If we could try to limit it, if it's a duplication or whatever, if new information,
Yes,
we'd
sir.
appreciate. Thank you.
I understand. I just want to say that I really compliment this board. You're having to go through, my name's Kelly Clark, I also live in Lampa Park Estates. You're having to go through a lot of sessions, hearings on the Blackstone development. And one thing that I've noted is that it seems like this segmented approach is really complicating your job. So the comment I would make is that it's really difficult to evaluate the full impacts of the traffic because we don't have any idea where these roads are going to connect from north across a mystery section in the middle down to the south. And so I'm just making the point that if we don't know where the connectors are going to be, how can you evaluate the full comprehensive impact or the traffic flow through the entirety of the area? My other comment has to do with the schools, and I really believe that the current traffic safety or traffic study is insufficient. It doesn't have a date on that as required by city municipal code. It doesn't say what peak time was used to evaluate, and I really think it's important. Both my kids walked to that school back, about 22 years ago now, but they walked to that school, and I know that the volume and the traffic there is a major concern. So thank you very much.
Hope just for my own little clarification, as the process continues, the tentative map, et cetera, we have, the Board of Supervisors still have control over what's going on road-wise, whatever, correct? I mean, as this stuff comes forward, it's still going to come through us, and it's going to go to the supervisors.
That's exactly right, which is why I included the implementation slide so that you could see we're at the very beginning of a process. And you're establishing the rules of the game for future development on the site. That's kind of where you are. And I've heard twice now, if I may, that there will be no traffic impact analysis. There will be a traffic impact analysis with the tentative map, and that will come before you as part of the tentative map application.
I just have a little difficulty they've come to us, they want a solution with another road, we're getting them that, and now we can't move forward until we know exactly where that road's, we're getting the traffic off best we can, railroad, with another road, be it to this street or wherever they decide to go. There are going to be controls over that as we go forward. If it's not acceptable, it would be whatever. So we just need to get past this phase to get to see what the next phase is. So that's my public comment line. Okay. Comments from
Yeah, I'll make a comment. It seems like we're really trying to push the cart before the horse. Yes, there's a lot of concern, and we've been through this process now twice. But the onus is not on us, it's on the developer. And like Hope said, once we establish the rules of the game, then the developer has to go out and try and find out where he can put this road. It may be that it becomes so onerous that nothing happens. But that's not for us to say, that's for the developer to say after he gets some sort of ground rules as to where to proceed. The tentative map phase, once he does all that, he's going to bring us a map, and he says, well, I'm going to put my road here, but I don't have the easement yet, and I'm going to have to buy this property. And that's fine as we look at it and look at the traffic studies and all the other things. The developer's got way more hurdles to go over than we do. And if we don't give them some place to start, we can't start the process. And, I'm real sensitive to everybody's concerns, but I'm not sure that we're there yet. The developer's got to have to do his homework and come up with something that's going to please all of us. And I think we've given them lots of ammunition to go home and make a checklist of what we have to please. And it may turn out to be too onerous, but that's not our choice, and it's not our job. So I think we need to move forward with the plan to see if there's some way that this can happen. If it can't happen, it won't happen. But I think we need to not be the Wharton-Hess progress, if you will.
And I go back to 1974, and I was the third or fourth house built in the kitchen development over by Seeliger School. And there was development going on in that area. There were hundreds of houses built. Stuff happens. I mean, you work with each other, and you work to get the things done the best you can and make it the best for everybody. So I just think we need, like you said, to get this part done so we can continue on and see what's going to happen as this continues. Do we need a motion or? I believe it.
If you look at the memo from August 28th, that's the most recent wording. So if you want to review that wording and identify if you support that wording, if you're recommending modifications, or if you're recommending that the board's initial thoughts of postponing the improvement to urban standards until build out, which build out to me means 100%.
I have a question, at least Monroy for the record, and it's just late, so my brain is tired. Are we in agreement about the percentage of completion for improvements? We talked about, it's currently 75, but we talked about being maybe more comfortable with 50 or something lower, so I just didn't know where we ended on that.
I'm comfortable with the extra 26 houses. If you make it at 50 and he decides to quit at 25, what do you do? I mean, it just, let's move forward with what staff has, come up with. I think I do not want to see it go to build out, obviously.
Right.
Whether there's a bond or not a bond, you need that second road in, and I think we should be happy that they're willing to do a second road, and if it works out at the 50, 75, I mean, whatever, I'm comfortable with the 75%.
Well, I would like less, but I'll accept the 70. Would you like a motion?
I'd love a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to consider the modification recommended by the MPA 17-185, to consider a modification recommended by the Board of Supervisors relative to the master plan amendment to create the Blackstone Ranch specific plan area for 26.89 acres of the existing Lampa Ranch specific plan area located to the east of Railroad Street between Solomon Road and US Highway 580, APN 010-051-44, as detailed in the August 28th memo.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
All right.
41.
Thank you all for your patience.
Thank you.
Thanks for your patience, Planning Commission.
Staff reports?
Yeah, just quickly on a couple items that have been before the Planning Commission. It went to the Board of Supervisors. The Planning Commission bylaws that changed your date of electing the chair and vice chair was changed. That was approved, went through no problem with the Board of Supervisors. As you've noticed, we had Candace Stoll, and as I mentioned, she resigned, going to work for South Lake Tahoe, and we believe moving out of town to go and work up there and not being able to have the time commitment here. So we're sorry she's not going to be able to continue, but we have applicants already in, and I think it's at the September 6th meeting that they'll interview a number of applicants. I think it's four or so that they have to interview to fill that position. For the next meeting, we have another portion of Lampa Ranch, tentative subdivision map on the north portion. It's a 2004 single-family residential units.
Can you folks please withdraw? Thank you.
I'll be done in a minute.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, so for the next planning commission meeting, we have the tentative subdivision map for 204 residential units, Lampa Ranch Phase 2. That's Lampa Ranch North Phase 2, north of 5th Street. Yeah, I don't think we got one. Zoning map amendment down on West Appian Way for a property that's split zone, single family, 1 acre, and retail commercial. Zoning it retail commercial. I think the project's going to be a hotel at that location. And a tentative subdivision map for airport hangars at the airport. And that's concludes my report. Thank you. Any questions? A what? Oh, the asphalt plant?
About the asphalt?
I'm not sure. That was actually an internal draft agenda that probably, yeah, those are the items that might be on there, but we haven't noticed on that last.
And a follow-up on Candace, Commissioner Stowell. I received a nice email, and she wanted to pass on how much she enjoyed working with all of us, and I told her on South Lake's gain will be our loss, I guess, but I'm glad she was with us for a while. Any other?
One comment. Our packet this time, do you all need a stapler? I will be happy to loan you a stapler, but it was very awkward to go through this thing with pages everywhere.
Well, yeah, 2 or 3 of the, I had a stapler for paper clipped. We get spoiled, you know. Plus, we want to hang on to these things. You know. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, point of order, public comment? Any more public comment?
Rex, do you have anything to say?
Public comment.
Sorry. Public comment. Seeing none. We're adjourned.